So we must do two things, two great things together to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. This symbol of bread comes up again and again. We begin with that impulsion of life to establish the true calculus in man, over and against the false calculus. The story begins, and it begins at truth as mind, that the Pharisees and the scribes come from Jerusalem, and they say to the disciples, what are you doing? We see that you are eating bread and you haven't washed your hands. You didn't wash your hands. So they come to Jesus and they say, why don't your disciples wash their hands when they're eating bread? You're transgressing the tradition of the elders. This is the hedge law, that law that we spoke about, because nowhere in the actual law did it say that they could not eat bread with their hands. And so Jesus says back to them, why do you transgress the commandment of God? Because of your tradition. So he could see that because they had inserted something that wasn't, they put in a part that wasn't holistic. They had inserted something into that law of God, that word of God, that would make void the word of God. It would affect the wholeness of that word. You see, it would pollute or distort that word. And so he banties back and forth with them about this true word and the untrue word of God. So they were offended in him. You know, sometimes when you find out that you're wrong, you can't admit it, so you just act offended. Isn't that a human? Yes, it's a human thing. It's a mortal thing. Belongs to the mortal calculus. And they were offended, and the disciples came and said, "Oh, you've offended them." You know, he said, let them alone. Let them alone. He said, they are the blind leading the blind. Boy, what a touch of mind, huh? The blind leading the blind. And he says, then, not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which proceedeth out of the mouth. Huh? Because it came forth out of the heart, really. Out of the mouth, meaning out of the heart, in other words, from mortal consciousness. We have this in the textbook, don't we? Someplace, I'm not sure exactly where, but out of the heart proceedeth evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, railings, etc. In other words, it's what comes out of the mouth, what comes out of mortal consciousness. Next to this, not having your hands washed is nothing. So don't worry about what goes into the mouth. He sees that, he contrasts really the two calculuses, the mortal calculus with the divine calculus, and shows that the mortal calculus will be based on just this kind of thing of the blind leading the blind, of the false traditions of the elders, and so forth. And then Jesus actually was sent away from that land. They said, oh, you better go. You're making a lot of trouble for us. And he really went on out of that particular area and went to Tyre and Sidon, I believe. It doesn't matter, but just for your information. But a lovely point comes in here that because he had to leave that area, he went out into a broader area, into a wider area. And so there was a widening and an expanding of the borders within which he began to develop and express his principle and to take on and show the true calculus of man. What was that? A touch of Christianity, huh? Widening the borders, right? Expanding the borders, yeah. So when he came to this other area, which was further out, and he met there someone who wasn't a Jew, who wasn't from the nation of Israel. He met the Syrophoenician woman, or the Canaanite woman. So he was really in a Gentile area, you see. You have to hear, what is this telling me? It's telling me there's a going out of the idea, a widening of it. So this woman, the womanhood, whenever you hear woman, you hear touch of love, the love consciousness came to him. This Canaanitish woman wanted to have what he had. She wanted to know about the Word of God. She wanted to know about what Jesus represented. She was really attracted to him in a great way, in a right way. And her daughter had a devil, what they refer to as a devil, probably some kind of a mental condition. We are still in truth as mind, and so she went to him and appealed to him for his help. It says, the text says, he answered her not. But she persisted. We could go into why he didn't answer her, but we won't. She persisted, she persevered, and she came and worshipped him and said, Lord, help me. And Jesus said, it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. This was a reference, really, the children's bread. The children were the children of Israel, the children of the house of Israel. And the dogs were the Gentiles. He says, I was not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And she still didn't give up. You feel that she was attracted, and nothing could break that attraction. And she said, Yea, Lord, even the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. And then he had a change of consciousness, a change really that would open him up to something beyond the children of the house of Israel, would open him up to the Gentile public, you see. Because he said, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it done unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that hour. And this is really a terrific story. It's life, really, impelling, I think, the the method of truth, the inexhaustible supply of truth, and its multiplication. How is that done? You see that it's the bread of truth, and this woman said, even the dogs eat of the crumbs that fall from their master's table. What is that master's table? You see that today we would say that it is that truth table. It's the table of truth for us today in the age of science is a truth table. You know that we have our truth tables, don't we? They are the calculi of truth. The calculi of truth. All of our matrices, you see. The matrix of the seven, the matrix of the Christ, the matrix of Christianity, the Dorley matrix, the textbook matrix, the oneness matrix, the platform matrix. These are truth tables. Truth tables. The model of being, the design of being, these are truth tables. And everything is implicant within that model of being or that design of being. You see that we have one great table that incorporates within itself, includes, implies within itself every other truth table. The whole containing the parts. If you want to call them parts, they are holistic parts. But that one table, you see, is the infinite calculus of truth for us, isn't it? And it's filled with, we could say it's filled with loaves, you see. It's filled with loaves that are in turn filled with crumbs. It's filled with great aspects of truth, if we say filled with the 7 loaves of the 7. And the crumbs of those 7 would be what? The ideas. The ideas of the 7. Really what is shown here is the method of science, induction and deduction, the inductive method and the deductive method, covering everything. Because the woman was begging for a crumb. She wanted a crumb. She was going to go the inductive way. She was going to go the ascending way. Because we know in our one great table that we have an ascending way and a descending way, don't we? So we have a way that begins with crumbs, and we have a way that comes out from the whole loaf. A whole loaf of truth. If we come out from the whole loaf of truth, we come out from that one infinite science, you see. Then we begin to break that loaf down, to break bread. Jesus was always breaking bread. What was he doing when he was breaking bread? Breaking that one great loaf of truth into its parts, but they are holistic parts. And that's bread is a wonderful symbol, because wherever you break it, you get the same thing. You get the whole, don't you? Yeah, every crumb is a holistic crumb. It partakes of the general character of the whole. This woman was begging for a crumb because instinctively she knew that every crumb was holistic, was the whole. So truth is showing us, this subject of truth is showing us the principle of holism, of divine holism, where every part, so-called, every crumb partakes of that general character of the whole. And we see that when we begin with a crumb, we can begin with an idea, Begin with those crumbs, with those ideas of the 7 synonymous terms. You immediately start building the loaf. You're building a loaf. This is the inductive method, whereas coming out from the whole loaf is the deductive method. And two great sides of the method of science. So when she said, give me those crumbs, just give me a crumb, he caught that, didn't he? He caught that. He said, this is terrific. This is terrific. What was it he said to her? Oh, woman, great is thy faith. Be it done unto thee, even as thou wilt. She certainly had that Christ consciousness within herself, didn't she? It was so dynamic, so active. And so her daughter was made whole because she had that consciousness of wholeness, and it was met by the Master's consciousness. If we say, give me those crumbs, we know that we're going to be building the loaf, the whole loaf, building consciousness into the form of the calculus of truth. So Jesus, who had that form of consciousness, what does it say here? Yes, he had that form of consciousness, was seeing it shadowed forth, so to say, reflected forth in the attitude of this woman. And that goes on with each one of us, that life is impelling upon us the urge, the desire, the wanting of that true beginning, the wanting to go the way of understanding, which is the ascending way. What is the result? Its form then is a form of consciousness that is wholeness itself, the form of the calculus of truth. We say it's consistent, it's coherent, it's faultless, it's without error or mistake. Isn't that a good example? That bread, the consistency of the bread is even, the coherency of it, the faultlessness of it, without errors or mistakes. It's a symbol for the Christ consciousness. And then we see that because Jesus had this consciousness, that he could feed the 4,000. Symbol for the calculus of man. He fed the 4,000. How did he feed them? He fed them with 7 loaves. All right, the 7 loaves, of mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, and love. He said, let me start with those 7 loaves. And he had the consciousness of the 7 in their wholeness as a whole. And so he used the deductive method. You have 7 loaves, and there is no end, no limit to the number that can be fed with those 7 loaves. It's not meal. What does she say about, it wasn't meal or monad, I think she says in the textbook. Those 7 loaves are unlimited. They are infinite. They have an infinitude of crumbs within them. All are feeding on the crumbs, the holistic parts of the 7. That's what we feed on. Assimilating and digesting them, this builds up the calculus of man, the true man. And that's what the 4,000 stood for. It was a symbol of the true man, to show us that we can deduce and deduce and deduce from our divine principle infinitely and never run out. So that when they took up of the fragments, the leftovers, again they had a terrific gathering. 7 large baskets, thank you. Doesn't matter how much you take from the 7, you always have 7 left over. But the baskets were the fragments, the parts, yeah.